Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC 288, Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo is almost here. It goes down on May 6th in New Jersey. And in this video, I'm going to go through the entire main card, briefly discuss each fight, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to grade UFC 288 on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst UFC pay-per-view ever, 10 being the greatest UFC pay-per-view of all time. And I'm also going to answer the question whether or not UFC 288 is worth your money. Now, before I get into anything, I'm going to put up a graphic of the entire UFC 288 main card. I want you to take a look at it and then comment down below what grade would you give UFC 288 on a scale from 1 to 10 before you even hear my opinion on the card. Now, how do I grade UFC pay-per-view cards? There's really 3 factors that I look at as most important when looking at a pay-per-view main card and trying to give it a grade. One being, how relevant is a fight to the division? Is it a championship fight? Is it a #1 contender fight? Is it like a, fight to break into the top 10? Or is it just a filler fight, just filling a spot? Second, is it a stylistically fun fight? Should it be a fun fight regardless of what happens? Is it going to be exciting, at least on paper? Does it appear as if it's going to be a fan-friendly fight? And third, and these are in no particular order, how skilled are the fighters in this matchup? Are they the elite of the elite, or are they absolute trash cans? Okay, starting off with the fight that opens up the main card, and the UFC can shuffle these cards around sometimes, but hopefully this is the order that it actually stays in, considering we're only a little over a week out. But it is Cron Gracie versus Charles Jourdain. This is a fight that honestly doesn't really belong on a pay-per-view main card. I'm going to be honest, Cron Gracie hasn't fought since October of 2019, where he lost to Cub Swanson. He disappeared, he went into witness protection, and now he's returning and he's opening up a pay-per-view main card. I don't understand how that makes any sense at all. I hate this fight on the main card, but I do kind of understand because Charles Jourdain, even though he's on a 2-fight losing streak, he's always in exciting fights. So I guess that's probably why the UFC's putting him on a main card. But I feel like there's much better fights that could have been put on this opening up the main card spot, like Drew Dober versus Matt Frevola. But I get it. They wanted that fight to kind of attract people to the prelims. I know the UFC kind of builds these cards a little bit weird. But Cron Gracie versus Charles Jourdain, on paper, it's a stylistically fun matchup, but everything else, it has no relevance to the division. And honestly, both these guys, neither one are trash cans by any means, but they're basically just filler fighters. Neither Charles Jourdain nor Cron Gracie are ever going to be towards the top of the division or even sniff like a top 15 or even a top 15 gatekeeper spot. It's just never going to happen. Charles Jourdain lost to Nathaniel Wood in his last fight, lost to Shane Burgos in the fight before that. He's fun, but that's pretty much it. He's fun. He has decent skills. Both guys are decently skilled. They're not the greatest. So I'm not really looking forward to that fight all that much. If anything, I'm just have a little bit of intrigue of where has Cron Gracie been for the last 3 or 4 years. That's the only real intrigue in this fight. Other than that, it's just a filler fight that should be decently exciting. Moving up the card, because there's not a whole lot to say about Cron Gracie versus Charles Jourdain, but the next fight is a great fight. We have Movsar Evloev versus Bryce Mitchell. We have number 10 Evloev versus number 11 Bryce Mitchell. And I love this fight, but I hate it at the same time. So first off, stylistically, very fun fight. Movsar Evloev, very well-rounded fighter, great grappling, great striking, on the come-up, undefeated. Then you have Bryce Mitchell, who's a relentless grappler, just nonstop pressure, nonstop pace, putting it on his opponents, looking for takedowns, good submission skills. But I do kind of hate this fight because it's on short notice. Originally, this was supposed to be Bryce Mitchell versus Jonathan Pierce. We were going to find out who was the bigger NASCAR fan. But unfortunately, Jonathan Pierce had to pull out of this fight, and Movsar Evloev stepped in. And I just think the Jonathan Pierce fight was much better and more manageable in terms of, can we get Bryce Mitchell win? Because in his last fight, Bryce Mitchell took on Ilia Topuria, another up-and-coming featherweight at the time, and he absolutely mauled Bryce Mitchell, beat him up on the feet, ragdolled him on the ground, and then submitted him. So Bryce Mitchell suffers his first defeat, and now he's taken Movsar Evloev on short notice at UFC 288. And I think the only reason the UFC did this is because they really needed to try to put some quality fights on this card because it started falling apart about 2 weeks ago. So I do love this fight, but I just wish it wasn't on short notice. and I wish it was different circumstances. These guys were originally supposed to fight in a main event back in November of 2022 when they were both undefeated. But now they're in different points in their career because Evloev's undefeated. He's surging as a contender. Bryce Mitchell just got absolutely destroyed by Ilia Topuria. So now we got Bryce Mitchell. We're at a point where Bryce Mitchell's kind of getting sacrificed to Evloev. He may very well win, but I don't like his chances in this fight, especially on short notice. And then you always have the asterisk next to it. No matter who loses, it's going to be an asterisk. Well, I took it on short notice. You know, Bryce Mitchell took a different stylistic matchup on short notice. Or if Evloev loses, he's going to say, look, I wasn't, 100%. I didn't have a full training camp. I didn't have great stamina. Whatever it may be, there's going to be an asterisk. But if you avoid all that, this is a good fight. I mean, Movsar Evloev, very good fighter, up-and-coming fighter. I believe he will be a future title challenger. Bryce Mitchell, I still believe he can get there maybe to like a contender spot. I don't know if he's ever going to challenge for a belt, especially when you have guys like Yair Rodriguez hanging out up there, Ilia Topuria, who just beat him, and now you have Movsar Evloev making his way up the ranks. But Bryce is still young. He's very good. He has that relentless pace. I think both guys are highly skilled. I think this is a fan-friendly matchup because no matter how this goes, it's going to be fun as hell because Bryce Mitchell just nonstop coming forward, looking for takedowns. Movsar Evloev, great grappling and striking. So this is a fun fight. Both guys are very good, and it's also relevant to the division because if Movsar Evloev beats Bryce Mitchell, that's going to be one of his best wins, if not his best win. And look what happened with Ilia Topuria. He beat Bryce Mitchell. Now he's fighting, I believe, number 5 ranked Josh Emmett. I think he's number 5. Not 100% sure on that right now. So if Evloev beats Bryce, it's going to propel him into that top 10 of the division. He's already ranked number 10. He's going to get a solid opponent, a highly ranked opponent in his next fight. And we need contenders. If Volkanovski continues to win, Volkanovski goes out there and beats Yair, we're probably looking at Ilia Topuria as next in line if he beats Josh Emmett. And if he doesn't, if Movsar Evloev beats someone highly ranked in the meantime, if he beats Bryce Mitchell and then fights another fight, he's probably fighting for a title. So this is a very solid contender fight to move up towards potentially a number 1 contender fight in their next 2 fights. Very relevant to the division. Great fight stylistically and 2 highly skilled fighters. The only thing is I just hate that it's on short notice. Moving up the card, we have Jessica Andrade versus Yan Xiaonan. I know a lot of people like to crap on women's MMA. I like this fight. I mean, you have Jessica Andrade ranked number 4, Yan Xiaonan ranked number 6. I know Jessica Andrade is coming off a loss, but she lost up a division at flyweight against Erin Blanchfield, who a lot of people believe is a future champion. So I think Jessica Andrade is still a very good fighter. She's an exciting fighter. She's a high-level fighter. Before she lost to Erin Blanchfield, she was on a 3-fight winning streak. And then you have Yan Xiaonan, who looked very impressive in her fight against Mackenzie Dern. The fight before that against Marina Rodriguez, who's still one of the best, was a split decision loss that a lot of people thought she won. I thought she lost, but it was a very close fight. And I think Jessica Andrade, Yan Xiaonan, they both want to strike. They're both looking for finishes. I know we don't see a whole lot of finishes in the women's divisions, but you have Jessica Andrade. I mean, of 24 fights, she has 9 wins by knockout, 8 wins by submission, and 7 wins by decision. So she has plenty of stoppages. And for Yan Xiaonan, she has 16 wins, 7 knockouts. And also, stylistically, this is a very fun fight. And both of them are ranked in the top 10 of the division. So it's very relevant to the division. I like this fight. I think it will be exciting. I've complained time and time again. I'll never forget when the UFC tried to put Misha Tate versus Lauren Murphy on UFC 276. That was a horrendous fight. I almost called the fire department. That's how bad that was, hoping Stipe Miocic would pick up. But I mean, this is a fine fight to be on a main card. I have no problem with this being the featured fight on UFC 288. It's a solid fight. Winner's going to be in a good position to fight for a title in the near future. Rose Namajunas has gone missing. You're probably getting Weili Zhang versus Amanda Lemos next. If Jessica Andrade goes out there and let's say she KOs Yan Xiaonan in the first round, she's going to be on the short list. I know she had a fight against Weili Zhang, lost, but that was a long time ago. So there's a chance the winner of this fight could be on a very short list of title contenders if they win this fight. I think this is a solid matchup. I think it should be exciting. And I think both girls are very good strikers. I mean, Jessica Andrade just marches forward looking to KO people. And Yan Xiaonan, very good power on the feet as well. Very good striking. And not really looking to grapple all too much. And, Yan Xiaonan, she's only on a 1-fight winning streak, but again, split decision loss against Marina Rodriguez. And the only fight she's really ever, been dominated in was against Carla Esparza, where she just got out-grappled. And she showed in the Mackenzie Dern fight, which was her last fight, that she's evolved quite a bit. So I think this is a solid matchup. I'm looking forward to it. And this is one of those female fights that we can actually look forward to on a pay-per-view card. Moving up the card, the co-main event, we have Belal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns. Number 4 ranked Muhammad versus number 5 Gilbert Burns. This fight was thrown together last minute because we had a fight that was the original co-main event, Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. That fight got canceled. Super unfortunate. That was the people's main event. And after UFC 288 lost that fight, it was like UFC 288 looked to be in shambles. And the UFC scrambled around looking for a suitable co-main event. Belal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns both step up to the plate. And now we have a 5-round welterweight co-main event, non-title fight. And I believe this fight couldn't be more relevant to the welterweight division because this is a number 1 contender fight. I know the UFC has said that Colby Covington is getting the next shot against Leon Edwards. And that may be true. But I believe the winner of Belal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns at UFC 288 will fight the winner of Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington. Or if the winner of this fight gets a big win, they could leapfrog Colby Covington altogether. And we may not see Colby Covington get a title shot in 2023. We may see the winner of Belal Muhammad or Gilbert Burns get the next welterweight title shot because they would be more deserving. And guess what? They did a favor for the UFC to take this fight. I mean, for Belal Muhammad to take this fight essentially on 2 weeks' notice against Gilbert Burns, hasn't fought since October, wasn't in a training camp. For Gilbert Burns, he just fought. He just literally fought at UFC 287. He's jumping right back in there. Who knows how much, he might have ballooned up after UFC 287 and beating Jorge Masvidal. And now he's taking on Belal Muhammad. Very difficult stylistic matchup. I love this fight. I hate that it's on short notice for the same reasons I mentioned earlier. I just feel like there's an asterisk next to it no matter who loses. But I love this fight stylistically. No matter what, I think it should be fun. People like to call Belal Muhammad boring, and honestly, he hasn't had some of the greatest performances. The last fight against Sean Brady was incredible. And when you put 2 elite grapplers against each other, because that's exactly what we have here, Belal Muhammad, very good grappling. Gilbert Burns, very good grappling. I think this is going to be a striking matchup. And we're going to find out who has the better cardio, who has the better striking. They accept it as a 5-round fight, so I'm assuming both of them are trusting in their cardio. And you can't get higher stakes outside of a title on the line than this fight. This is a number 1 contender fight, high skill level. I mean, this co-main event has absolutely everything. I love it. The only thing that I'm a little bit disappointed in is that it is on short notice. But I'm really looking forward to Belal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns. I think whoever wins will be fighting for a title in their next fight. Whether they have to wait till early 2024 or they get it, in maybe the fall or, early winter, I think Belal Muhammad or Gilbert Burns, with a big win here, will be fighting for the welterweight title in their next fight. It depends who it's going to be against. Is it going to be Colby? Are they going to jump over Colby? Or, you know what I mean? Is it going to be Colby or Leon if they do fight? Or is it going to be Colby's going to get skipped altogether, which I would absolutely love considering Colby is 2-2 in his last 4. He's on a 1-fight winning streak, and it's against Jorge Masvidal. Meanwhile, Belal Muhammad's on an 8-fight win streak. If he beats Gilbert Burns, he'll be on a 9-fight win streak. Gilbert Burns is on a 2-fight win streak. If he beats Belal Muhammad, he'll be on a 3-fight win streak. So I think whoever wins this fight is deserving, but I can't wait for this fight. I think it's a solid co-main event. I don't think it replaces Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. I don't think it fills those shoes, but it's pretty close. I'm really excited for this co-main event. Moving up on the card, the main event, we have Aljamain Sterling versus the returning Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo, the former bantamweight champion, dropped his belt as a negotiating tactic, retired back in May of 2020. This is a great fight. And a lot of people don't like Aljamain Sterling. A lot of people don't like Henry Cejudo. So I feel like this main event isn't getting enough credit. But I think this is a solid fight. You have Aljamain Sterling, who hasn't lost since December of 2017. And I know we have some of those controversial fights in there. We have the Petr Yan fight, the original title fight back at UFC 259, where he put on an Oscar-worthy performance and he got kneed to the head, and then he heard the ref say, this is going to be a DQ, and he flopped backwards, and he won the title that way. But then in a rematch against Petr Yan, even though it was very close, I believe it could have went to Petr Yan. I scored it for Petr Yan. It was 2-2. First round was a toss-up. Aljamain Sterling won the belt, or he solidifies himself as champion in the rematch against Petr Yan, and then he beats TJ Dillashaw, even though he had the injured shoulder. There's a lot to just kind of delegitimize him, but we can't forget he went out there in 2020 and absolutely mauled Corey Sandhagen and submitted him in the first round. I believe that's his best win. And even for all the faults of Aljamain Sterling, we can pick apart his resume and delegitimize him. He is still a very skilled fighter. He has elite jiu-jitsu. He has very funky style of striking. He has good power on his feet, but he has great grappling and striking and jiu-jitsu. And I think, or not striking, just grappling and jiu-jitsu. His striking is awful. But he has kind of a funky style that mixed with the grappling, he's able to be, successful on the feet. And then you have Henry Cejudo, which who knows how Henry Cejudo is going to look. His last loss was in December 2016, a split decision loss to Joseph Benavidez. He was the 2-weight champion. He won the belt over Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. Then he moved up, or he fought TJ Dillashaw at flyweight, beat TJ Dillashaw, was moving up to fight TJ Dillashaw. TJ Dillashaw popped from their previous fight, so he didn't fight him for the bantamweight title, and he fought Marlon Moraes, who was an absolute killer at the time. TKO'd him after losing the early rounds. Then he fought Dominic Cruz on short notice and TKO'd him, and Keith Peterson smoking cigarettes and whatnot before the fight. But nonetheless, Henry Cejudo, very good fighter, highly skilled fighter, former Olympian. And I think this is a great matchup because you have Henry Cejudo, who has the wrestling ability. You have Aljamain Sterling, who wants to take you down, get your back, and look for a submission. And both guys have decent striking. They use it in different ways. Aljamain has that funky style, but Henry Cejudo, his striking was ever evolving. I mean, to go out there and TKO TJ Dillashaw in the way he did, I know Dillashaw cried about it afterwards, but it was a fine stoppage. And I'm very curious to see how this plays out. Also, I'm very curious, how is Henry Cejudo going to look after 3 years off? I do think that this is one of those fights that's being massively overlooked because people don't like Sterling or Cejudo, but I still think this is a very highly skilled main event. I think it's two of the best in the world, regardless of how you want to look at it. It can't be more relevant to the division. It's for the bantamweight title, so there couldn't be higher stakes on the line. And I think stylistically, this will be a very fun fight because Aljamain Sterling, what is he going to do if he's not able to get the takedown on Henry Cejudo? And how is Henry Cejudo going to look coming back after 3 years off? It's going to be a very compelling main event. So when I look at this fight card as a whole and I try to give it a grade, I like the card quite a bit. I really do like the card quite a bit. It looks horrible in comparison to like a 287 or a 285. 287 was just amazing. Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 2. That card was stacked. I think that I gave that card a 9 out of 10. That's how good that fight card is. And when you compare it to those cards, UFC 288 really looks terrible. But I do believe it still is a solid card. I don't think it's like the worst card we've ever seen or anything along those lines. I remember back in 2020, we're getting like Amanda Nunes versus, I think it was Felicia Spencer as a main event. So those times, this is nowhere near that. UFC 288 is stacked compared to something like that. But I do have those few gripes of the co-main event being on short notice and Movsar Evloev being in on short notice. And then you have the fight that opens up the main card, Cron Gracie versus Charles Jourdain. I'm not super happy with all that, but I do think it is an okay card as it stands. And that's why I am giving UFC 288 a 4.5 out of 10. I think it's a quality card. It's just not a great card. It's not something I'm dying to see. And honestly, I do believe if you're kind of like a fringe fan and you're kind of debating about whether or not you should order this or not, you can probably skip this and be totally fine. But I do believe there are fights worth watching. I do believe it is worth the money, especially when you consider the UFC stacked UFC 287 and 285. And I just think UFC 288, when you compare it to its original form, where it had Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush, it just looks disappointing after that. So that's why I have to give it a 4.5 out of 10. I'm a very tough grader, but I still do believe you have a great main event, highly skilled main event that means a lot in the division. I think the winner of that fight is going to be self-proclaiming themselves as the GOAT of the bantamweight division, even though it's not. I think the co-main event is for a title shot, whether it be against Colby Covington or Leon Edwards. The women's strawweight fight could be potentially for the next title shot after probably Amanda Lemos. And then Movsar Evloev versus Bryce Mitchell. That's going to propel one of their careers into a top contender spot in the featherweight division. But still, I feel like it's lacking a massive main event. I feel like it's lacking a massive fight in general that has a great storyline, that has, just that it factor that everybody wants to see, like Alex Pereira, Israel Adesanya, John Jones, Cyril Gane. I just don't think this fight card has it. That's why I'm giving it a 4.5. But I do believe it is still worth your money. But if you're on the, fringe about it, if you're sitting on the fence about buying it, you can skip it, catch the highlights, and then tune in for UFC 290, I guess, because 289, I don't know. 289 is really solid outside of the main event, which is horrible, which is Amanda Nunes, Juliana Pena 3, the fight nobody wanted. But that card's kind of stacked underneath of it. So usually when we would get one of these main events like Sterling versus Cejudo, we would get like a crazy stacked card underneath of it because we didn't have that it factor main event. Unfortunately for 288, things started to fall apart. UFC did the best they could. I still think it's a great card. I still think it's a fun card. It just doesn't hold up to UFC 287 or 85. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Did I give it a good enough grade? Should it have been higher? Should it have been lower? Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and make sure to like the video. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.